Greetings, everyone, and you have messed up my brain in such a fun way, Solanum. Okay, we're back to normal blade shapes with this one. Sorry, I'm filming this directly after the initial impressions video on the Solanum over there. Today is the long-awaited, maybe, follow-up to the Maranza Zika, a very interesting Balisong, and I know there's going to be a few comments about it. I know I did the cat first. I know you're excited about the cat and maybe about the zippy one. I just need a little bit more time with those guys. But this one was a pretty open and shut case that I feel pretty confident filming a little bit early on this one. This is the Maranza Zika, a three-way collaboration between Cerrone Knives, Acid Works, and Freedom Fabrication. Three pretty well-known makers within the community. And on paper, this thing kind of rocks. Grade 5 titanium Chandwich handles, S35 VN blade steel, on bushings, 4.2 ounces. Just awesome. And coming in at a price of, I believe, let me just confirm here, I've got it open, $450 US. Just an excellent value proposition in what has quickly become, and probably has been for much longer than I realize, one of my favorite price points, which is that kind of $400 range where you're getting titanium, you're getting really good blade steel. It's just kind of an awesome price point. You got things like the Slift T, you've got the Solanum, you've got the Zika, you've got the, even like the Cygnus back when that was out, I think was in that range. And I want so badly to be charmed by this little mosquito here. And I don't say that just randomly. This thing is actually designed after the wing pattern of a mosquito, hence the name Zika, you know, the virus that some mosquitoes can carry. A very interesting inspiration for your Balisong, no doubt. But, dude, this thing rocks so hard. Because it just is awesome. $450 for something that looks like this and flips like this. I think it has all of the right charm. The balance is excellent. The blade is so interesting. These milling lines are awesome. You've got G10 for the people that like it. You've got titanium for the people that like that. The balance genuinely rocks on this thing. Now, when Ted sent it to me, because this was generously loaned to me from the collection of Ted flips, it had 2 out of a possible 5 weight pins in it. Now, if you see the weight pins, it's a pretty interesting setup because 5 or 4 of the weight pins are on this side and 1 is like down here somewhere. So what Ted had was 1 in the corner and then 1 kind of in the middle over on this side. And that flipped so excellently. The balance was almost perfect. If we talk about balance alone, that balance would have been probably my favorite thing that I flipped this year, and maybe one of my favorite things that I flipped in the last year. It was so solid. It carried enough blade weight to make fans excellent. It stuck to your fingers really well in handle bias tricks like chaplains and rollovers and things of that nature. And it just kind of rocked to flip. It had a good weight, had a good momentum profile, it had a good weight distribution. It was so good. And even when I messed around with some of the weights, Ted was all excited because you could just take out a screw and move the scale over and you could pop the pins in. I realized it's a little bit harder to get them back out because then you have to take the other side off and that becomes a whole process. So currently I have all the weights in, and unfortunately compared to the 2 weights, because the 2 weights was so perfect, I didn't really want to mess with it too much. But I just decided, let's just see how much it changes. I put all 5 weights in, and it didn't change a ton. You know, like it's definitely more handle bias now. It carries more momentum, but it still kind of has that overall balance profile that I enjoyed from the Zika. You know, it fanned well, it choker fanned well, it chaplains well. It's still got enough handle bias to do those tricks, but it's still got enough blade weight to make those fans super fun. And that is exactly where I like my Balisongs. But now it's got a little bit more momentum in the ends of the handles and a little bit more weight, which really, really brought out the biggest problem that I have with the Zika. Up until this point, I've been singing this thing's praises. You probably think, wow, you recommend this, don't you, Ethan? No, unfortunately, I really don't. Because the Zika is such a tragic case of build betraying balance. The balance on this thing is awesome. To me, it is one of my favorite things that I have picked up in a good little bit. But the build betrays it almost entirely. And that is where most of my opinions on this Balisong lie, because the Zika is the single most uncomfortable Balisong that I have tried in the last 6 months easily. And there's a few different reasons for that. I've heard a lot of people, when discussing the Zika, draw the blame to the scales. And the scales are definitely part of it. We will get into that. But I think that there are 3 equal areas that share the blame for the build betraying the Zika so badly. Number 1, for me personally, and this might not be an everyone thing, I have very small fingers, which means that when I chaplain, my finger goes right into that Zen cup right there. And this is an issue I've had on a few Balisongs. There was, a change made to the BB Barfly stuff back in the day that made it much better. Got the new blade for that. That was awesome. And I think this could really use the same thing. My finger goes right on that corner there. And it's chamfered, it's rounded, it's not sharp. But when you're spinning a Balisong like this, especially with all the weights in, it just becomes 10 times more uncomfortable. And while I didn't get any blisters like I thought I would in the initial video, now that I have these extra weights in here, that becomes a real possibility. This is borderline painful to chaplain for long periods of time. But that's not the only reason, because number 2, the Balisong is just very blocky. It does have rounded handles, but there are a lot of corners. There are flat sides. There are thick flat sides. Fanning and choker fanning, while the balance is awesome, also has a lot of corners that are digging into my fingers and, kind of killing some of the momentum of some of those choker fans. I kind of give my choker fans a 60-40 shot of working on this thing, because sometimes the blockiness of the handles just messes it up enough and the momentum gets off kilter enough that it just doesn't work very well. When it works pretty well, but when it doesn't, it dies pretty quickly. And that flat, large area is only made worse by the thing that everyone wants to bring up when I talk about the Zika, the scales. Now, the scales aren't awful. They don't have that signature G10 chalkiness, that texture issue that I find that I dislike on a lot of G10 Balisongs. But of course, because G10 can just never work for me personally, I guess, they're just sharp. They're not finished very well. They're very hard. They're very rough. They're almost sandpapery in some instances. But I think the biggest reason is when you combine these very flat sides with these not sharp, because when you feel them with your finger, they don't feel very... Okay, actually the Ultim ones kind of do. Actually, the Ultim ones really do. The blue G10 side feels... At least I think this is Ultim. This might not be Ultim. Don't quote me on that. But the blue G10 one feels okay when you run your finger across it. Actually, the Ultim one is a little bit sharp. But again, when you're running that around your finger, it just amplifies the problem tenfold, especially with all the weights in the end of the handles, like I have the Zika configuration in currently. The scales really do bring this thing down, but I think everything that I've mentioned with the build brings it down in an equal way. I don't think the scales are disproportionately responsible for that discomfort that I'm feeling, because this is an uncomfortable Balisong. And it's really disappointing, because it's a Balisong that I would so easily recommend to people, that I would love to even own in my own collection. But the build betrays it in almost every sense of the word, because it doesn't matter how well a Balisong is balanced if you don't have any fun flipping it because you're too busy nursing your finger back to health from a chaplain that went a few rotations a little bit too long on that. So the Zika ultimately ends up being a conflicting one for me. I love the balance. I really do. I can't really describe how fun this thing is to flip if I can get through the discomfort that my hands are feeling. But a lot of times I can't. It's very similar, and I can't believe I'm saying this. It's kind of like the spider knife, where you kind of feel it after you flipped it in your hands, at least for me. Maybe not everyone is going to feel this way. Maybe with a set of aftermarket scales that are a little bit more rounded and a little less sharp, this thing would be freaking awesome. And honestly, that probably is true. I would really love to see if there's any sort of aftermarket scales for this thing that could maybe clean up a little bit of that. But some of the other problems would still remain, you know, the very flat, blocky sides and handles, and most importantly, this little Zen cup right here. So overall, the Zika really did disappoint me. I want to love it. I do love it in so many ways, but the one way in which it falters, which is the build and the comfort, is such a huge problem to me personally that I just can't really look past it for very long. It's super fun to flip for 5-10 minutes, but once you get beyond that, it just kind of becomes a chore, and that's really disappointing, because this is an excellent collaboration from a bunch of really well-known makers. So it's disappointing to see it come out this way. Overall, yeah, I can't really recommend the Zika. If you are someone who's like, just soft hand idiot, you can't, you just got to build up some calluses. Well, you might really enjoy this Balisong. But for me, comfort is something that unfortunately is a huge part of flipping, because, you know, you're doing it for long periods of time. You're rubbing on the same parts of your hand over and over and over again. And the Zika, I really wasn't joking in the last video when I did those bits about the Slift T feeling like silk. The Zika makes every other Balisong feel like it's made out of a cloud. Flipping the Slift T genuinely feels like a cloud right now, because there's no pressure points, there's no sharpness. I can't feel it in my hands like it's the spider knife. It just feels genuinely so silky, Slift T smooth, baby. So that's the Zika. A great Balisong, one that I am excited to have been able to try. Huge thank you to Ted for sending this thing out. But man, does that build betray the balance. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Later.